Good afternoon and welcome back to the final lecture on assets and manipulating the content for the game. So we now have all of our materials in place. We're using the textures that we have to map them to the different models that we've imported. So hopefully it's starting to make a bit more sense on how the assets come into the game, what they comprise of, and how to modify them. So the final thing I really wanted to recap, as I'm aware, I was a bit worried that it didn't make a whole lot of sense approaching it the way we approached it previously for people who've never come across this before, is I want to show you how we can quickly change the colour of one of the models in the game. So we're going to focus on the player model as we have that set up as one of the more unique ones. So what we need to do is, I already have Photoshop open with the texture that we're going to edit. So let's say that if we go back and quickly look at the model again. So let's say that we want the orange sections on here to be red. So we're going to have a red player now. So all we need to do is we'll open up this texture with your art package of choice. And now, as I said, I've got used to using Photoshop, so that's my chosen editor. And I'm aware that this isn't free, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not going too in-depth with the art and giving the key bindings and things, because there's people that may not be able to follow along for that reason. But you can do similar things even just using Paint or GIMP or something like that. GIMP is meant to be a very good one for free use, but all we need to do is just change the colour of this square here. So if we choose our red that we're going to use, and then I'm just going to fill that block in, which was orange, I'll fill that in with red. And then quite simply, Control S on that and save over the original PNG, so the player texture, and we'll save that out as a PNG so it comes in as a texture properly in the engine, not a JPEG. And then if we go back over to the Unreal Engine, this is a very handy feature inside of Unreal. What we can do is if we navigate to the textures, if we find our player texture here, we don't need to re-import a brand new texture. What we can actually do is if we right click and then just re-import, as long as the files haven't been moved since you imported them, then it will have a reference to where it's located on your system, and it will just check for any changes that have happened in that texture. So in just those two simple alterations, what we've done is we've been able to edit the colour of the player ship. And that's as difficult as it is to change things in the setup that I've given you. So hopefully you can see how quickly we can modify and change the colour styles and the schemes in the project that we'll be making. So I'll just go back and I'll do that once more just to recap. So we'll do something completely unique again. We'll make this a kind of lime greenish colour. So get a nice lime green. And this time what I'll do is I won't just change the carapace, I'll change that bit as well. So again, we're going to save this as a PNG. We can either save this as a brand new file and import that file, or to keep the amount of textures we have done, I'm just going to save over it again. So replace that, go back to the Unreal Engine, and again, rather than going on the whole new import new asset, we can just re-import as long as this is in the same file location. I've not saved it. Re-import as long as this is in the same file location, and it will update. And then we have our really ugly green ship, green and white ship. So there we go. That's how we can start changing the colours and the textures of things in this project. So hopefully that now makes a bit more sense how the texture is being used. And I would say, out of changing the UVs in Blender, or just changing the colour, or making a new texture in Photoshop, it's probably going to be a lot easier to do the texture option in Photoshop. Because again, even whilst I'm just talking now, I've been able to quickly, I've not really made much of a change, but I've been able to change the colour of the ship, and that looks better than my orange, but that's fine. So yeah, so this is just some of the ways you can amend the assets and play about with the style of the game as you go through. And again, there's no reason not to do it on the game texture. The game texture is just a slightly bigger version of the other textures we're using. And if you wanted to look in Blender, or even just compare against the colours of the squares, you can see that in the models that tree is just using the pink square, that's using the orange square, and they're using different squares for the tree trunks and stuff as well. but you can do the same thing. You can start playing about with those colours or move the UVs around maybe for that one because there's a lot more going on, but the options are there, and hopefully you now have an idea of how to approach both of those. So I think we now have our assets set up in the game. They're ready for use essentially. They're definitely decorated now, and I will leave that there for the assets section of the course, and I will see you in the next lecture.